She trusted him, a friendly face in a world she thought was safe. But lurking behind that warmth was a predator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Her innocence became his weapon, exploiting her trust with chilling precision until her life was forever scarred by his dark intentions. This is one of the most heartbreaking stories of a young girl whose innocent trust was exploited by someone she thought she could rely on. What began as a bond turned into a nightmare as dark intentions shattered her world, leaving scars that would last a lifetime. On a bitter February morning in 2021, the sleepy town of Canton awoke to a chilling mystery. Sandra Birchmore, a young woman with dreams and a child on the way, had vanished from sight, sparking worry among friends and co-workers. Desperation took hold as they pleaded with police to uncover the reason for her silence. When officers arrived at her apartment complex, a suffocating sense of dread filled the air. Outside, Sandra's car lay buried under layers of untouched snow, a haunting symbol of time frozen and life stalled. With the property manager's help, they opened her door, stepping into a dimly lit space filled with the eerie glow of Christmas lights. The living room lay undisturbed, a snapshot of a life paused. But as they entered Sandra's bedroom, an unsettling discovery awaited. There she was, seated upright on the floor, a black strap around her neck tethered to the closet doorknob. Her cell phone lay inches away, as if she had fought for one last call for help. At first glance, the scene appeared to whisper of tragedy, a young woman lost to despair. But those closest to Sandra knew better. She was vibrant, full of hope, and eagerly awaiting her future. Her cousin, Barbara Wright, sensed a darkness beneath the surface, saying, "We didn't believe it was a suicide. Was Sandra's tragic end really self-inflicted? Or did someone else have a hand in her fate?" The haunting questions demanded answers, and her loved ones vowed to uncover the truth behind Sandra's final moments. Sandra was a bright and hopeful girl with long, shiny auburn hair and a sprinkle of freckles on her nose. She dreamed of becoming a police officer one day, idolizing the brave men and women in uniform who protected her community. But Sandra's life was not easy. At school, she often faced bullying, and at home, she struggled to help her sick mom, Denise. Sandra Birchmore's childhood was like a puzzle with missing pieces, and her home life was filled with shadows. She wasn't a bad kid. She just wanted to be noticed. A teacher who remembered Sandra said she could see the signs of neglect. Sandra often acted out, hoping someone would pay attention to her. When she was 9, she and her mom, Denise, joined a program called Strengthening Families. It was supposed to help families like theirs learn how to communicate better and support each other. Denise found the program helpful and realized that instead of yelling, it was better to sit down and talk things out. But even with this new knowledge, life remained tough for Sandra. At school, things didn't get any easier. Her 7th grade teacher, Andrea Wasoka, noticed that Sandra craved attention and sometimes exaggerated stories to get it. She got along better with adults than with kids her age, which made her feel even more alone. Other children teased her relentlessly, and when she tried to ask for help from teachers, it only seemed to make things worse. By the time Sandra turned 12, she was desperate to find a place where she belonged. In March 2010, she signed up for the Stoughton Police Explorers program, hoping to connect with others who shared her dreams of becoming an officer. Although she was waitlisted at first, she became a standby member and watched as Officer Robert Devine led the group with strict discipline. It felt like a military camp rather than a supportive community. Meanwhile, behind the scenes of the police department, trouble brewed. Officer Anthony Bickerton was caught in a scandal involving stolen goods and corrupt deals that had been going on for years. Despite these issues within the police department, Sandra admired officers deeply. Her grandfather figure, Gerald Gadet, had been a decorated Army veteran who encouraged her dreams of law enforcement. When Gerald passed away in May 2012, Sandra felt lost without his guidance. Her cousin Barbara Wright remembered how devastated Sandra was. It was as if her guiding star had vanished from her life. As time went on, Matthew Farwell joined the Stoughton Police Force and became an instructor in the Explorers program. He began meeting Sandra after school at the local library to help her with homework. But while Sandra hoped for guidance in her studies, Farwell had other intentions that were far from innocent. In June 2019, he sent her a shocking text that revealed his true feelings. "Did you think I wouldn't want to fuck you?" This message turned their relationship into something dark and confusing for Sandra. What started as a safe space for learning quickly transformed into something dangerous. On April 10, 2013, when she was just 15 years old, she and Matthew Farwell crossed a line that would haunt her for years to come. According to documents later revealed by the FBI, that day marked the first time they were intimate. Farwell seemed proud of this moment, even years later. In messages he sent Sandra in 2019 and 2020, he asked her personal questions about that day, like, "What was the first day you said, OMG, I want this guy to be my first?" He even reminisced about how he would have been with her when she was just 14, as if it was something to brag about. Sandra, caught in a whirlwind of emotions, told him how she felt on that day. She wrote that she had butterflies and called it the best day of my life. But beneath those words lay confusion and fear. She started to think about Farwell in a way that made her uncomfortable. She texted him about her worries, saying she didn't want him to react badly because of their age difference. Farwell's messages often made her feel trapped. He once told her that he could have easily taken advantage of her without any protection if he wanted to. Even though Farwell was married to another woman by May 2013, his relationship with Sandra didn't end. They continued to meet secretly while he was on duty as a police officer. The FBI later uncovered shocking details about their encounters. Farwell used their relationship in harmful ways, punishing Sandra for things like getting bad grades or not sharing her phone location. He introduced dangerous behaviors into their relationship that left Sandra feeling scared and confused. Despite all this turmoil, Sandra worked hard at school and made impressive progress. She was on track to graduate on time, showing everyone around her that she could rise above her difficult circumstances. In spring 2014, her mother wrote a heartfelt letter to Officer Robert Devine, thanking him and the Stoughton Police Department for their support in the Explorers program. It seemed like a small victory in a world filled with challenges. But behind the scenes, Sandra's life was becoming increasingly complicated and dark. On a sunny June day in 2015, Sandra Birchmore felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as she hurried across the Stoughton High football field to collect her diploma. The wind fluttered the American flag behind her as she walked across the stage in her cap and gown, her auburn hair neatly tied back. It was a moment she had dreamed of for years, but little did she know that this achievement would soon be overshadowed by a series of heartbreaking events. That summer marked the beginning of a difficult time for Sandra. With high school and the Police Explorers program behind her, she found herself feeling lost and without direction. Meanwhile, Matthew Farwell's life seemed to be thriving. By May 2016, he and his wife had moved into a beautiful 4-bedroom house in North Easton, where they were raising their 2 children. It felt as if everything was going right for him while Sandra's world was falling apart. Tragedy struck in May when Sandra's mother passed away suddenly from a massive stroke at only 52 years old. Her cousin Barbara Wright remembered how devastated Sandra was, saying, "It was horrible. Sandra was shattered." Just a month later, Sandra faced another loss when Claire Gadet, the woman she had always thought of as her grandmother, died at the age of 89. With both of these important figures gone, Sandra felt completely alone. Though her aunts moved into her childhood home to help her, things were tense between them. In May 2020, an argument with one of her aunts escalated so much that they called the police, worried about Sandra's well-being. Officers took her to the hospital for an evaluation, but after a short assessment, medical staff determined she wasn't in danger and sent her home just hours later. Around this time, Farwell began sending Sandra flirtatious texts again. When she apologized for worrying him during the incident with her aunt, he replied casually, "I wasn't worried. I know you are fine." Despite everything happening in her life, Sandra still dreamed of becoming a police officer and enrolled in a criminal justice program at Massasoit Community College. However, her relationship with Farwell grew darker and more troubling. He started sending her disturbing messages about sexual fantasies that made her uncomfortable. One message read that he wanted to hold you down by your throat while I pound you, making it clear that he wanted to exert control over her in ways that felt wrong. Sandra also began seeing other men during this time, including Farwell's twin brother, William Billy Farwell, who was also a police officer in Stoughton. Her friend Haley Souza described how Matthew Farwell used his authority to manipulate Sandra while William acted like the sweet one, creating a confusing and unhealthy dynamic between them. It was like a twisted game of good cop and bad cop that left Sandra feeling trapped. Things took an even stranger turn when Robert Devine, the very officer who had first mentored Sandra in the Explorers program, began reaching out to her online using a fake name inspired by a character from the movie Lethal Weapon. He communicated with Sandra about sexual acts while he was on duty as a police officer. Haley said it was clear that Sandra was being manipulated and controlled by these men. They told her to do things and send pictures and videos of it. She became trapped in a world where she felt she had no voice. The content of their messages and the nature of what they asked her to do were so shocking that one investigator later said he wished he could wash his eyes out with holy water after seeing them. As Sandra navigated through this chaotic life filled with betrayal and manipulation, it became painfully clear that the people she once admired had turned into figures of darkness instead of protectors. The dreams she held close were slipping away as she struggled to find her way through the shadows surrounding her. As the days turned into months, Sandra Birchmore found herself caught in a whirlwind of confusion and desperation. One day, she learned that a video featuring her with a U.S. Army recruiter had made its way into federal custody. This happened after she had asked William Farwell, the man she had complicated feelings for, to help her connect with someone in the military. Sandra wanted to become a police officer and thought that joining the Army would help her achieve that dream. William introduced her to an Army buddy, and soon they became friends on Facebook, which was against Army rules. Eventually, they crossed a line, and their encounter was recorded and shared with William. The recruiter, who used to be a public face for Army recruitment, disappeared from his job after the scandal. Amid all this chaos, Sandra began to dream of something that could bring her joy, a baby. She talked about becoming a mother all the time, sharing her hopes with her friend Haley Souza. She had a plan, Haley recalled. No matter what, she was going to have a baby, but this desire led Sandra to spend too much money on pregnancy tests and borrow money from Haley to feed her obsession. Their friendship began to strain under the weight of Sandra's fixation. Haley warned her that trying so hard to get pregnant might put her in danger. In late December 2020, Sandra sat down with colorful magic markers and a poster board. With careful handwriting, she wrote, "Congrats, we are going to be parents," and decorated it with cute stickers of baby animals. Excitedly, she sent a picture of it to Matthew Farwell, hoping for joy in return. But Farwell's reaction was not what she expected. "I have literally nothing to say right now," he replied coldly. When she insisted they would keep the baby, he responded with uncertainty, saying they needed to talk. Sandra felt empowered as she navigated this new chapter in her life. Recently, she had secured a job as a teacher's assistant at East Elementary School and moved into her own cozy apartment in Canton with help from her cousin Barbara Wright. She was also pursuing classes in nursing while continuing to chase her dream of becoming a police officer. However, everything changed when Sandra learned some shocking news from Joshua Heel, an animal control officer in Stoughton. He revealed that Matthew Farwell was expecting another child with his wife. This revelation hit Sandra hard. It felt like another blow in a series of betrayals. In her pain and anger, she confided in Joshua about everything. Her secret relationships with the Farwells and Robert Devine, along with the disturbing messages Matthew had sent her. Feeling bold after learning about Matthew's new child on the way, Sandra decided it was time to take control of her situation. She drafted a message meant for Farwell's wife that would expose their long-standing affair but hesitated before sending it. Instead, she confronted Matthew directly and made him an ultimatum. If he wanted her silence about their relationship, he would have to agree to unprotected sex so they could try for the baby she so desperately wanted. Farwell agreed but added his own twisted conditions for their encounters. He told Sandra that she should pretend to resist him during their meetings because he enjoyed that kind of power over her. In their conversations, it was clear that Sandra was determined to conceive and willing to do whatever it took to make it happen. She promised Matthew that she wouldn't speak badly about his wife or children because they both wanted something from each other. He wanted control over her while she sought love and family. Sandra Birchmore's determination finally paid off. After many disappointing pregnancy tests, she was overjoyed when she saw a positive result. But just as she began to dream about her future as a mother, her fragile relationship with Matthew Farwell began to unravel. A colleague of Farwell's had heard rumors about their secret affair and told him that one of Sandra's friends had contacted the police station to expose their illicit sexual relationship. Panic set in for Farwell, and he quickly messaged Sandra, saying, "I literally can't believe this is even real life, like what else do I have to worry about now?" His words showed how scared he was that everything might fall apart. In January, Sandra confided in her baby's godmother-to-be about a frightening incident. When she showed Farwell a sonogram image of their baby, he exploded in anger, shouting, "That's not my child," and pushed her to the ground. It was a shocking moment that left Sandra feeling scared and confused. Later that month, Farwell asked for a key to her apartment, which she made for him at Walmart. When he came to pick it up, Sandra noticed he was acting strangely. He started looking around her bathroom and closet, which made her uneasy. She texted a friend about it, saying, "It was just really odd he started looking around." Her friend agreed it was weird, but Sandra tried to convince herself that maybe he was just coming around. On February 1st, 2021, as a powerful snowstorm approached Massachusetts, Sandra was excited for a cozy snow day after her school announced an early closure. She quickly texted Farwell, hoping they could spend some time together. But his response was short and cold. He wouldn't be in the area. What Sandra didn't know was that Farwell's wife was about to give birth to their third child. Meanwhile, Sandra was busy planning her future as a mom. In the days leading up to her death, she had prepared for a Valentine's Day pregnancy announcement and even scheduled an appointment with her doctor. That afternoon, Sandra excitedly texted Farwell about a baby gift that had arrived at her apartment and mentioned planning a baby shower in March. She ordered food through DoorDash and went outside to brush snow off her car before returning inside. Throughout the evening, she moved from one task to another, texting friends, shopping online for baby furniture, and chatting with her cousin Barbara over Facebook. At 9:08 p.m., Farwell sent her a message asking if he could come by for a second. Just 2 minutes later, Sandra replied that the door would be open for him. Security cameras captured Farwell entering Sandra's building at 9:40 p.m., wearing a hoodie and face mask. But just 3 minutes later, he hurriedly left again. The next morning brought new life into the world as Farwell's wife gave birth to their son. Later on, an investigative journalist named Kirk Minihane uncovered a startling photo of Farwell cradling his newborn, while still wearing the same clothes he had on when he visited Sandra. By February 4th, 2021, no one had seen Sandra for days. Concerned staff at her school requested a wellness check on her. As snowflakes danced in the cold wind, Canton police arrived at her apartment complex and knocked on her door, the same door she had left open for Farwell, but there was no answer. After checking the parking lot and finding her car buried under snow, they used a key from the property manager to enter her home. The officers moved cautiously through the cluttered kitchen and living room before entering Sandra's bedroom. Inside, they found an unmade bed lit by a desk lamp and Christmas lights twinkling around the window. But then they saw something that made their hearts drop. Sandra's body sat upright on the floor with a black strap around her neck tied to the closet doorknob. Her cell phone lay just out of reach. The response from emergency services was quick but mechanical. Even though it was clear that Sandra could not be saved anymore, they still called in medical responders. A firefighter confirmed her death at 11:46 a.m., noting that there were no signs of foul play or struggle in the room. To those who arrived at the scene, it appeared to be a tragic case of suicide, a heartbreaking end to Sandra's dreams of motherhood and happiness amidst all the chaos surrounding her life. The phone call that shattered Darlene Smith's world came from the Canton police, and it was a call she never expected. They told her they had found Sandra Birchmore's body, and because Darlene was listed as Sandra's emergency contact, she had to hear the terrible news first. The officer on the other end claimed that Sandra had taken her own life. But deep down, Darlene felt a heavy certainty that this couldn't be true. When she called Sandra's cousin, Barbara Wright, they both shared the same feeling of dread. "We agreed something just wasn't right," Barbara remembered. "We didn't believe it was a suicide." As the investigation began, state police reports from that day showed some strange oversights. The trooper who first arrived at Sandra's apartment noted there was nothing suspicious. He examined her body for signs of struggle or abuse but found none. However, he also mentioned there were no marks on her neck to suggest she had fought against the ligature that was used. Even though the police quickly declared her death a suicide, later confirmed by the medical examiner, retired homicide investigator Joe McDonald pointed out that just because something looks like a suicide doesn't mean it is one. "No law enforcement officer can make that determination," he said. One crucial piece of evidence seemed to be overlooked: Sandra's beloved necklace, a delicate gold chain with a pink flamingo charm. Her family discovered it broken on the floor, tangled with a clump of hair that nobody could explain. This hair was never mentioned in any initial police reports. Oddly enough, while the police noted the mess in Sandra's apartment, like trash and cat fur, they missed this important clue. Later, an FBI agent reviewing crime scene photos found the necklace clearly visible in pictures taken before Sandra's body was moved to the morgue. On the day of her death, Sandra had been busy with life, making plans and appointments like any other day. She had even seen her therapist just a day before and expressed no thoughts of wanting to end her life. Despite multiple calls from Sandra's friends and family pointing to Matthew Farwell as someone who could have harmed her, investigators seemed to ignore him as a suspect. Barbara told them directly, "I told them Matt Farwell killed her, but no one listened." While state police chased leads at Sandra's workplace, interviews with her co-workers revealed little information. They described her as seeming off, but never mentioned any fears related to her boyfriend, who they only knew as a Stoughton police officer. One teacher called Sandra an oversharer, but no one reported any concerns about her safety. Darlene Smith was one of the first to mention Farwell's name to investigators. It wasn't until 2 days after they found Sandra's body that they identified him as the last person likely seen with her alive. Surveillance footage from her building showed his tall figure entering just before she died. Even then, the report concluded that the video didn't provide any further information about what happened inside. As Darlene and Barbara struggled with their grief and confusion over Sandra's death, they couldn't shake off their feeling that something terrible had happened. A feeling that would only grow stronger as they sought answers in a case filled with unanswered questions and overlooked clues. The truth about what really happened to Sandra Birchmore seemed buried beneath layers of silence and denial, leaving those who loved her desperate for justice and clarity in a world that felt increasingly dark and uncertain. The evidence from the video was enough to at least bring Matthew Farwell in for questioning. A state police sergeant, who was also from Stoughton and had played hockey with the department, took on the case despite a possible conflict of interest. His relationship with Farwell was unclear, but in his reports he referred to him as Matt, a sign of their familiarity. This casual language made it seem like they were friends rather than just colleagues. When the sergeant met with Farwell in a school parking lot, he listened as Farwell painted a chaotic picture of his relationship with Sandra. Farwell expressed sympathy for her troubled life, mentioning a drunken encounter they had in 2020. He claimed their last intimate moment was in October of that year and denied being the father of Sandra's baby. He described an argument during his last visit to her apartment on February 1st, where he called her crazy and she called him a dick. Despite their fight, Farwell insisted that Sandra showed no signs of being suicidal when he left her that night. He even mentioned that she had other sexual partners while they were together. On February 9, 2021, Farwell handed over his phone to the police. Months later, his work phone from the Stoughton police was also taken as evidence. State troopers examined both phones but found very few clues, almost nothing of interest at all. It seemed odd that there would be so little communication between them. The day after Sandra's body was found, Donna McNamara, Stoughton's first female police chief, became increasingly worried about the many statements regarding Sandra's relationships with the Farwells and Robert Devine. She decided to start an internal investigation led by Deputy Chief Brian Holmes, who brought in retired state police Captain Paul Italian and forensics expert Michael Bates. Known for his work on a high-profile case involving a girl who urged her boyfriend to take his own life through text messages. Within weeks, these investigators uncovered thousands of text messages exchanged between Farwell and Sandra. This was shocking because it contradicted what the state police sergeant had reported, that there was no communication between them and that Farwell had deleted everything. The sergeant's report mentioned some data from Sandra's laptop about her relationships with other men, but claimed there were no threats of harm from anyone, including Farwell. However, the internal investigation revealed serious evidence of statutory rape in those text messages. As a result of these findings, the Stoughton Police Department placed Farwell on paid leave in February 2021, but they did not press any felony charges against him. The case seemed to stall for years without any real progress. Then, in 2023, things began to change when journalist Kirk Minihane released a podcast about Sandra's case. Among those who listened was Melissa "Mizzy" Berry, a content creator who focuses on helping families of homicide victims. Inspired by the podcast, Mizzy and a friend decided to dig deeper into Sandra's story. Nobody was talking about Sandra, Mizzy explained. So I started the Justice for Sandra Birchmore Facebook page in February 2023. She reached out to everyone connected to Sandra and eventually got in touch with Barbara Wright, Sandra's cousin. Barbara had been one of the last people to talk to Sandra on the night she died. Sandra called her all the time, Mizzy said passionately. Nobody thought she committed suicide. Nobody. With renewed interest in Sandra's story and support from people like Mizzy and Barbara, hope began to rise that justice might finally be served for Sandra Birchmore, a young woman whose life had been filled with struggles but whose memory would not be forgotten. In August 2023, a group of determined supporters gathered outside the office of Norfolk District Attorney Michael Morrissey, seeking answers about Sandra Birchmore's death. They held signs and handed out flyers, their voices united in a call for justice. Melissa "Mizzy" Berry, one of the leaders of the group, recalled their efforts. We wrote letters and marched to his office, but he was supposedly on vacation. Despite this setback, their social media campaign gained momentum, keeping Sandra's story alive in the public eye. Their movement even attracted supporters from another case involving a woman named Karen Red, which was also handled by the same district attorney's office. As a result, the Justice for Sandra Birchmore Facebook page grew to more than 14,000 members. While Sandra's supporters fought for justice, FBI agents were quietly conducting their own investigation. They uncovered thousands of text messages that dated back to 2019, painting a very different picture from what state police had reported. The FBI brought in Bill Smock, an expert on cases involving strangulation and asphyxiation. He had previously testified in a high-profile trial, and his analysis challenged the state police's conclusions. He pointed out that a fracture in Sandra's hyoid bone didn't match the way she was found seated in her apartment. Smock explained that such fractures usually happen during strangulation or full body weight hangings, not when someone is sitting down. On August 27, 2024, the evidence gathered by the FBI led a federal judge to issue an arrest warrant for Matthew Farwell. The next morning, Farwell was completely unaware of what was about to happen. Now a truck company owner instead of a police officer, he drove his gravel truck to a shopping plaza in Revere. Suddenly, a team of heavily armed FBI SWAT agents surrounded his vehicle and ordered him to step out with his hands up. Farwell complied without putting up a fight as they arrested him on charges related to Sandra's death. Later that day, he appeared in court for the first time since his arrest. Prosecutors argued against granting him bail, stating that he had killed Sandra Birchmore, a young pregnant woman he had exploited for years. They claimed he had tried to hide his actions by staging her death to look like a suicide. Acting U.S. Attorney Joshua Levy stated during a press conference that Farwell had used his knowledge as a former police officer to cover up what he did. He said, "Mr. Farwell went over to her apartment that evening and he strangled Sandra Birchmore to death." This revelation sent shockwaves through the community. In September 2024, Farwell decided not to have a hearing for his release and chose to stay in federal custody instead. It was unclear if he had anywhere else to go. His wife had removed all traces of him from social media and remained silent about the case. As Farwell awaited trial, the the ripples of this disturbing case continued to spread throughout the community. His twin brother, William Farwell, who had also been involved with Sandra, faced serious allegations himself. He had lost his law enforcement certification after it was revealed that he had searched police databases for information about Sandra and lied about their relationship. William had also been intimate with Sandra just weeks before her death, while knowing she claimed to be pregnant with his brother's child. Meanwhile, Robert Devine, another officer connected to Sandra's case, was placed on leave and later resigned after internal investigations into his conduct with her. Joshua Heel, a former animal control officer who had also been involved with Sandra, resigned from his job and began cooperating with federal investigators. The Justice for Sandra Birchmore movement continued to grow stronger every day. What started as a small group of concerned citizens became a powerful force demanding accountability from those who had failed Sandra and her family. Mizzy Berry declared passionately, "We'll be out there until they're held accountable," showing that no matter how long it took, they would not give up fighting for justice for Sandra Birchmore, a young woman whose life was taken too soon, but whose story would not be forgotten.